The Rescue of William Shrew, written and illustrated by M.K. Christensen, copyrighted 2022, all rights reserved, and there's no reproduction of any kind allowed. The Rescue of William Shrew. One bitterly cold November morning, quite early, William Shrew crawled through the grass, wet and miserable. Heavy rain had ruined his underground burrow, a cozy earthen home lined with grass and fur. He barely escaped through the front door, leaving his soft armchair, his pipe and slippers, and his crossword puzzle. His wife, Winnie, and the new babies were in the nursery in the back of the burrow, behind the kitchen, pantry, storerooms, bedroom, and William's study. Did Winnie and the babies escape too? Where were they now? William did not know. With every step, William sank into soggy earth up to his tummy and often up to his nose. Water gushed in the ditches. Beyond the herb beds and rose bushes, he saw a huge, solid structure, the farmhouse. As fast as his short, strong legs could carry him, William slid and splashed toward it. Under the old farmhouse, all was dark and dry. Tiny and weak, William leaned against a brick pillar and closed his eyes. Then he heard whisperings from the dark, quiet, sharp voices. "It's not safe here," they said. "Do not stay. This is the realm of the Cat Queen." William did not know who the Cat Queen was, but the warning in the voices was unmistakable. He turned and fled back into the rising water and biting wind. Suddenly a sparrow flitted past overhead. "Oh," she exclaimed, "a baby mouse in the grass." She chirped and flew away. William's voice was small, but he stood up on his short legs and puffed out his thick gray fur and gave the sparrow his fiercest look. "I am not a mouse," he yelled. "I am a shrew." But no one was listening. William slogged his way through parsley, basil, and thyme and across the long grass to the pasture fence. The north wind and cold rain made him sneeze and shiver. A red squirrel chattered at him angrily. The squirrel curled his large spreading tail over his head like an umbrella and said, "Cht, cht." This squirrel chattered to another squirrel, and that squirrel to yet another squirrel. Thus the message of the tiny, wet animal flopping himself from puddle to ditch across the pasture was sent and received from one corner of the farm to the other, far away. By lunchtime, William Shrew, weak, shivering, and hungry, arrived at the stout pine tree. Its trunk was huge, and its graceful limbs arched down to the ground. Even at noon, it was shady and cold near the trunk, where a large wooden door hung on heavy black hinges. A creaky sign swayed overhead. It read, "Nutmeg Tavern," and in small letters below, "Rodents Only." A dirty red squirrel with yellow teeth and an unfriendly grin leaned against the pine trunk. "Whatcha want?" he asked. He bent over William and squinted at him. "What are you?" the squirrel asked. "Some kind of mole?" "I am a shrew," William said, mustering all the confidence he could. He was not as tall as the squirrel's belly button, which was buried beneath his stinky, matted fur. "I need a room for the night, and good food, of course," he added. With many squeaks and groans, the massive door opened, and William entered. The tavern was warm and dark. Lanterns hung and torches flamed overhead, but still the rafters were shrouded in shadow. Dozens of squirrels peered at William, while mice in waistcoats dashed around with steaming trays of food. The aroma of excellent food wafted from a stone stairwell curving through an archway in the far wall. The mice plopped platters of roasted nuts, bowls of creamy oats and bread pudding, iced pine cones and frothy mugs of ginger brew in front of hungry rodent customers. They tied napkins under their chins and sighed happily. Pecan shells littered the floor. "May I help you, sir?" an elderly rat said to William. "You look hungry and wet, sir." Yes, I am," William replied. In spite of the warm atmosphere, good food, and friendly host, William was nervous in a room of large squirrels. "Allow me," the rat said quietly, and he led William to a low corner table near the kitchen stairs. William's short legs ached when he sunk into his chair, and he wrapped his paws around a mug of hot butter nog. He sighed as he thought of Winnie and the babies, of his cozy chair and his kitchen fire, all lost. "Psst!" a tiny voice said from a corner. "Psst! Mr. Shrew!" William peered behind his chair and saw a young dormouse. The tiny creature nodded his head and looked down. Around his neck was a slim, long, bright green scarf. "Hello," William whispered. "Is this your table?" The dormouse did not reply. Instead, he beckoned William to come with him. In the dark corner behind a curtain was a low door. The dormouse and the shrew scurried silently through it and into a dry tunnel lit by shimmering fireflies clinging to the ceiling. "What is this place?" William asked. "Shh," the dormouse replied. Soon they passed through another curtain into a warm, snug room with a blazing fire in a stone fireplace. This tavern was very small, with low beams overhead and short tables and chairs. All the small creatures were there. The dormouse turned to William. "This is the tail end. This is the snuggest place on the farm for little animals. You are welcome here." In a flash he was gone. At each table, a huddled cluster of little animals. Mice, voles, moles, finches, chickadees, and even hummingbirds chattered together. William sat at the bar beside a plump goldfinch. The hostess, a chubby chipmunk with a blue apron, placed a bowl of spiced oatmeal in William's paws. "You lost, stranger?" she asked. "I'm Mrs. Burrow, owner and proprietor." "My home is flooded," William said. "I don't know where Winnie and the babies are," and a tear fell into his oatmeal. "There, there," Mrs. Burrows said, and patted his paw. "I'm sure they're just fine." She winked at the goldfish, who flitted off to a perch on top of a wingback chair by the crackling fire. "Most lost little creatures find their way here, just like you. They'll turn up." "No, no," William replied. "She won't find me here. I must go search for her again." And William stood up. "There now, stranger," a deep voice rumbled. "No need to jump up quite yet." Beside Mrs. Burrow, a portly chipmunk appeared. "Name's Burrow, Captain Burrow. We'll help you out, no worries. Now, finish up that porridge and warm your belly." The tail end became a buzz of activity when the little creatures discovered a rescue was underway. Captain Burrow gathered his crew, who headed off to his ship. They searched all flooded areas of the farm for Winnie and the babies. Finches, chickadees, and sparrows flew out the front door in formation to conduct aerial searches, reporting to Mrs. Burrow every 10 minutes. 3 tiny mice scampered upstairs, weighed down with fresh bedding and scrubbing brushes. All afternoon, the rescuers returned with their news. 1 salamander rescued in the west ditch, or Grandpa and Grandma Goldfinch are safe in the greenhouse, or 3 mice were floating away when we picked them up. 3 soaked mouselings stood by the roaring fire while Mrs. Burrow vigorously toweled them off. William Shrew paced back and forth in the tail end. This would not do at all. In spite of sneezing, shivering, and a fever, he would search for Winnie. He took Captain Burrow's wet weather gear, which was far too big for him, and went out the door before Mrs. Burrow could stop him. The north wind howled in his ears. Rain turned to ice, hurting his face and paws. William put his head down and turned toward his old home. I will find them, he whispered. While William slogged deeper into floodwaters, overhead the sparrows carried his little babies, wrapped in snug blankets and tucked under the birds' downy feathers, straight to the tail end. Winnie Shrew, rescued by Captain Burrow and his crew, was sailing against the wind to the tail end tavern, too. Only William Shrew still needed to be rescued. He was utterly lost in the dark when a tall black wall appeared before him. The farmhouse, he exclaimed. He ran through a curtain of rain falling from the eaves and into the darkness under the house. William huddled against the same pillar as before. In the pitch dark, pairs of yellow eyes blinked and disappeared. One pair, very large, very yellow, never blinked. William heard low breathing and a deep rumbling in the dark. The Cat Queen, he thought. The giant cat lunged at William, but at the same moment, Captain Burrow's ship thundered through the rain curtain in a wave of ditch water. The whole house lot was flooded. The sturdy ship hoisted William Shrew aboard and blasted 2 volleys of acorns at the Cat Queen, who hissed and yowled and ran away. To the tail end, Captain Burrow shouted. To the tail end, his crew replied. William, Winnie, and the baby Shrews slept warm that night before a lovely fire in the tavern's best guest room. They stayed with the Burrows for a week while William recovered from his cold. Mrs. Burrow taught the babies to play canasta, and Winnie worked on her knitting. Stay the winter with us, Captain Burrow asked William. But William missed his own armchair, his slippers, and his fire. Soon he was repairing his old home, scrubbing out the mud and airing the rugs. He even found his old pipe under the doormat. The end of the tale. I hope you enjoyed this story. Thank you.